All right, I think we should be back. We had the computer that we stream off of went blue screen, had the big frowny face on it, and completely restarted. Just broke off Shotgun's rant. The first time we have him back in the studio and everything's messing up. It knows he's around. It doesn't want to hear him finish. Shotgun, did you have any more thoughts on whatever you were saying, if you remember what we were discussing?
You might have finished.
Pretty sure that was sabotage.
Yeah, someone in the chat before we cut off said Lincoln Riley was watching and cut the power. No, we did lose power yesterday in the area. A big transformer went out in Hermosa. But no, I don't know. We got the blue screen of death on the computer. We should be started again on YouTube and Facebook, so sorry about that. But we're back.
There you go.
Yay.
All right. We were talking about, I think, wide receiver blocking. And Ryan, I think that how this all started was you asking what USC does well.
Yes.
I would have echoed what Shotgun said in that they convert on third down, over 50%, kind of getting back to the elite ways of the 2022 team. And still defensively, they have the best third down defense in the Big Ten and the sixth best third down defense in the country. Problem is they're not playing well enough on first or second down, and in the games that they've lost, they haven't played well enough on fourth down when the other team has gone for it, including that game-winning Minnesota touchdown. But I feel like, and I said it on Twitter earlier this week, I understand that people are down on USC, and I am too, but playing that well on third down on both sides of the football is normally a pretty big precursor to winning a lot of games. And USC still hasn't found a way to win the games, and I'm sure USC fans don't want to hear, hey, they're 2 plays away from being 5-0. But if you play that well on third down, week in, week out, on both sides of the ball, you're going to win more games than you lose. And I think that's why it's been surprising that USC just hasn't found a way to win these games, because they've been the better teams on the money downs when it matters most. Just feels like at the end, when it actually matters most, it's been USC that's coming up a little bit flat.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's indicators, right? Like what's, if you want to get an assessment of some, there's kind of indicators of how whatever project you're on is doing. But a lot of indicators, like third down success, third down defense is a big one, and for the fact that USC is so good at it and only 3-2 is baffling. For Michigan to go 28 minutes in the second half without a first down, 3-and-out, 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 turnover, 3-and-out. And you don't win that game. Like there's some things that are kind of baffling. To go 7 of 11 on third down against Minnesota, like find a lot of people that have gone 7-11 on third down and lost. Like it's probably not very common. So I think that's what's frustrating. And to me, it's the critical errors. And you want those indicators. When I do my 3 keys to victory every week, like you could say certain things, but if I said, hey, USC needs third down success and they can win, that would have been right because they had third down success and didn't win. So like, for USC, there's some interesting ones out there, but one of my assessments this week and one of the keys this week is going to be about critical errors that are killing drives. I mean, to have so many drives get killed in Minnesota, because of 3 turnovers for sure, all of them in opponent territory, a sack starting another 3-and-out drive, a negative run, another 3-and-out drive, the missed field goal, the dropped pass on third down, like big mistakes that killed the drives. I think those are what USC is going to need to avoid. They've done the other stuff well, but they haven't avoided that huge mistake. And they've just made so many of them. I think now on both sides of the ball, even the Michigan game, like you go that long without giving up a run, but when you do give up one, it's a massive one, So to me, it's like you have these indicators and they're doing well in some of them, but the critical mistakes one, I don't know how to quantify that, but they've just made so many of those things. It's been baffling.
I'm not the first one to say this, but winning is a skill.
Yeah.
At the end of games, do you find a way to win or do you find a way to lose?
Yeah.
And right now, USC's finding ways to lose. Whether it be, and you say critical errors because there's so many different things. You can't just say, well, it's just the turnovers.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the offensive line. Well, it's just – no, there's different things every game, it feels like. Yeah. And the long run, there's each part in the, you had the fumble in the Wisconsin game on special teams. Like every part's doing their part.
Yeah.
And so you look at it and you say, what can you start cleaning up and doing better? Or is this a team that is destined to fail versus destined to find ways to win, just because they don't have that innate ability to go out and find different ways? They don't have that person that pushes them over the hump when things aren't going their way and makes the one play on their own, just makes the Superman play, which is what you saw from Caleb Williams at time, which is what you saw from Sam Darnold or Adoree Jackson, in that Washington game. You think back to all these superstar players. they put you over the hump. Is someone going to step up and be that for USC? Is someone going to get a sack ever from the pass rush and not just get to the quarterback, but get the quarterback down? Or is someone, I mean, you've seen them create some turnovers. I think the defense has done a good job of that. It's not been some outrageous number like it was in 2023. 22.
Yeah.
I'm terrible with getting years right.
That's okay.
Lincoln's first year. But they've been able to create some of those. Kamari Ramsey's been on it. Eric Gentry, those type of players create those type of plays. Now, what can you do without Eric Gentry out there? Because it doesn't seem like he's going to be available once again, if he's available at all the rest of the season. So, who's going to start becoming the big-time playmakers versus you need guys that are playmakers and you need guys that can hold their own. And that's one of the biggest differences. This was something I talked about with different people, Aaron Taylor, CBS sports analyst, some other people at Big Ten Media Day. What's the biggest difference? And people go, it's the physicality of the Big Ten. It's not the physicality of the Big Ten. USC's been plenty physical.
Yeah.
It's that your third-string guy can step in and still be physical. Instead of your third-string guy being a true freshman and he can't hold his own. He gets pushed back on every play. The Big Ten guys, the cornbread eating guys from Iowa, they may not be able to make a play, but maybe they don't make a mistake. They just hold their own and just give you a neutral. And that's all you need them to do when they're stepping in because someone is injured. That's what USC doesn't have because of the depth issues that they've had from not being able to recruit on either side of the line for the past, consistently the past 5 years. So that's why you see a couple guys get injured, and now suddenly it's like, whoo, you fell off a cliff in some areas because you lost your playmakers and there's no one to step up. Now they have some guys that are capable of that and will be playmakers in the future. I think those freshman linebackers have a chance, but are they ready to do that yet? Who can step in the meantime for them and at least hold the line and someone else can step? That's what you're looking at is who can fill the pieces and type of things because they're just thin on depth. And I felt that was going to be the concern with this. Now, I thought it would be much bigger on the defensive line or offensive line. That really hasn't fully occurred yet. Now, Anthony Lucas leaving is a concern and Barry Alexander not being there. But they've been you haven't lost starters yet from there and had a big concern like, who's even going to play? Whereas, at some other spots, you've lost some of the guys that have been making the plays, so who's going to step up now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that Shotgun makes a good point with the depth, and I think we saw that tested last week more than any other game throughout the year. I really thought after week one in that game against LSU that this team was going to be a team that knew how to win, that they were going to be a team that maybe we don't play our best game offensively or defensively, but if it comes down to one drive, we are going to make that drive. And I thought it was an interesting point listening to Cody Kessler talk on the Victory podcast that USC puts out. USC has had game-winning drives potentially there in multiple different games and just hasn't been able to get it done. When you look at the Michigan game with the shovel passes, that much maligned play calling drive, offense couldn't get it done. Then the defense couldn't get that one final stop either. In the Wisconsin game, obviously they win it, but they get the football back, and I know Miller Moss was coming out of the tent, but they go 3 and out on that drive, and then obviously the defense comes up with the pick six later, and that was huge. And then this week, they have a chance, to get a stop, then they get the ball back with the game tied, and they go 3 and out. There was a pass interference penalty USC didn't get that Lincoln Riley talked about on Tuesday. And then the defense has another chance for a stop. They don't get it. USC still gets the ball back, a chance to drive down for a touchdown, and they can't put it in. I was telling Shotgun after the game, with how good Lincoln Riley's offense normally is, I feel like over the last 3 years, they've had chances where, hey, it wouldn't have been a miracle, but it would have been something close. We don't have a lot of time left. We don't have any timeouts, but we need to go down and get a touchdown. And maybe you're on the road. I'm thinking of the game like 2022 at Utah when, there was, I know, the holding penalty on the kickoff, but they still had some time left to drive down. And they just haven't been able to, really shock the world and put together a touchdown drive when they absolutely need it in situations like that. And you can say the same thing about this past week against Minnesota with the interception, or when they got the ball back against Michigan. And I know they didn't have a lot of time left, but they really haven't had one of those drives either. And I wonder if the first time they have something like that, it turns into a snowball effect where we showed ourselves we could do it once. Now every time we get the ball in that situation, we feel like we're in command, not we're fighting against all odds here.
Well, I feel
LSU
like
game,
the LSU game, you would look at that and think it would do that.
Yeah.
But that seems more like the aberration than the truth there.
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, they've had many opportunities, and I go back to winning as a skill, and as a play caller, It is too. Can you call the right plays? I just looked through my charts, and the penultimate drive, a little vocab word there, the next to last drive for them outside of kneel downs, 3 and out since the Utah State game, every game.
Yeah.
Last 4 games, they've gone 3 and out on their next to last drive.
And they were, not the Utah State game, but the other ones were very important. They needed it. They needed those drives. They haven't been able to perform. And Lincoln Riley offenses average 40 points a game, right? And they're not at 30, I don't think, this year. So there's concerns on that side of the ball for sure. And Lincoln Riley's, he's a genius when it comes to this stuff. You pay him a lot of money. He's got to figure it out. Like, whatever you got, whatever dudes you have, you need to figure out a way to score more points that you're scoring and have more key drives than you do now, to be able to perform on key drives, to be able to not make the critical mistakes. And so to me, you don't really worry about the offense, and now you are. And but the one good thing is, like, if you were worried about the defense last year, did you have any confidence that it was going to get fixed? With Lincoln Riley, there should be some confidence that it's going to be fixed, right? So even on the defensive side, like, they took a step back against Minnesota. It was an overall worst effort of the season, which you don't want to see in week 5 or game 5. You want to see it getting better, not trending down. Like, they started off high and they've kind of gone downhill since. But I would say this: if you need to fix one side of the ball, it's probably better to do it the offensive side, because Lincoln Riley's done this a few times. So, but you got to do it. Like this, score points against Penn State. They only scored 27 against UCLA. Now they just took their foot off the gas, and they were playing with their food in that game a lot. But I would say in this case, just go out and score a bunch of points. Put pressure on Penn State to do stuff, and they could score points. Just go do it. And they just haven't been doing it this year.
You've noticed that the offense has not been as good since Lake McCree got hurt. Now, they've ran a lot of stuff in the game at Michigan that we were kind of baffled by, all the the screens to him behind the line of scrimmage and stuff like that.
That didn't make sense.
But what he was being used for prior to that, as a weapon over the middle, as that that check down if need be for Miller Moss, they haven't had a guy that has consistently gotten open in the middle of the field. Now, maybe it's just because Lake McCree was forgotten about, but Zachariah Branch, Mekhi Lemon, they've used Deuce Robinson in the middle, and Deuce has been good in the red zone, but they just haven't consistently had someone in the middle that can be that option for just the big body that makes the catch, the contested catch with someone on his back since Lake McCree. Now, he did practice this week, so maybe he'll be back sooner than later, and that can help rev up the offense a little bit, but also his blocking. Now, Cade Eldridge has done a fine job, but not a great job. And then Walker Lyons, same thing. Walker Lyons played more snaps in this game, I believe, than Cade Eldridge. I have to look in a second. But they were using – he's more of a receiving tight end than a blocking tight end. So with your offensive line struggling, you need an actual experienced tight end that can block for you. So I think that injury has gone under –
That's a good point.
Has not been talked about, but is one that – maybe having a bigger impact than this, everyone is realizing. Obviously, on the other side, Gentry is a huge impact to lose him. And Anthony Lucas, we'll see if he's available. They brought a card out for him on the sideline to potentially card him out. Now, they did not. He walked off on his own power, but he was back at practice this week and doing stuff. So hopefully that means that he avoided any major damage there. But that was definitely scary to see that there was a card out and it was for him.
Yes,
because he's been the one guy that's been able to create some pressure in the backfield. So if you lose Gentry, you lose him. That's your best player at each level, the front 2 levels there. And then Jacoby Covington being out, granted you do have more depth at cornerback, but you potentially lose one of your best players each 3 levels.
Yeah.
Like, that's not good. So on offense, you lose a running back or you lose a wide receiver, you feel like you can fill in, but tight end has been a spot where they haven't been able to fill in with someone that's much experience. That's the biggest thing. All the guys that are filling in, no experience. And that goes back to one, recruiting. That goes back to not being able to blow anybody out in the past. All these different things from the past are slowly adding up right now when you're playing in a tougher conference like the Big Ten.
It felt like USC needed to do whatever it could in 2022 to field a good team. In 2023, I think they saw they had success the previous year with transfers, so they went and they brought in a lot of transfers and realized at season's end, especially with the offensive line and on some other positions on the field, bringing in a bunch of transfers just didn't work. The cohesion wasn't there. Just because Dorian Singer was really good at Arizona, you can't always just plug and play a guy. You need to find a guy that's the right scheme fit. And so I think USC had the philosophy this offseason, on the lines and in many places across the football field, we don't want to build with just transfers. We want to see what we've got. We want to let the talent that we have here play because we want to have this cohesive team that likes each other and turn into a developmental program. I think you are seeing some of the growing pains of that. And I know that we've talked all season about maybe if they just brought in one more offensive lineman from the portal, they wouldn't be having these problems. But it felt like USC made its bed. They didn't want to bring in a bunch of transfers, wanted to let the young guys play, wanted to see what they had and build a cohesive unit. And they're kind of taking their lumps with that, where Shotgun mentioned that a lot of the players that are playing right now, don't have that experience of winning. They're younger guys, they're sophomores, they're redshirt freshmen, but they're getting a lot of time. And the guys that come in as depth haven't been tested at USC and don't come from other programs where they've played a lot. And even some of the transfers that they brought in are guys that are maybe new to a starting role, like a guy like Gavin Meyer. But you kind of have to go with what you did in the offseason. You didn't bring in transfers, so you can't go anywhere else on the offensive line. It's got to be Alani Noah and Elijah Page, or maybe it's Amos Talalele at right guard, but I know Noah played very well against Minnesota. On the defensive side, it's got to be a Kobe Pepe or Devin Tompkins. You can't take a midseason transfer, and you didn't want to bring in, a ton of guys through the transfer portal because they saw what happened in 2023. So maybe it was a bit of an overcorrection, and they could have stood to taken a transfer or two on the offensive line or at other positions on the field, but they wanted to go with these sophomore receivers and the young guys on the offensive line and different players here and there who were already in the program. And that has, I think, led to the fact that USC is a young team, kind of a green team, which I think will help them for the future, but certainly has caused some of the problems that we're talking about now.
And I think on both lines, you realize by, year 2, 3, 4, whatever of the transfer portal era, it is a lot harder to get elite talent out of there. And it costs a lot more money than what it did before. So USC wasn't playing that game, and I think that's part of the reason, too. I think they would like to bring in an offensive tackle, and they didn't. And they certainly would have, they tried defensive tackles, and Isaiah Riggs didn't work out. He comes in and then leaves, without playing a game. But it costs a lot of money to get big linemen, and that's one of the things that was hurting USC too.
And there's less guys that there are, like receiver. You bring in Jay Fair, you bring in Charles Ross, you bring in Jaden Richardson. These are veteran guys that have played a number of snaps that aren't necessarily going to be the guys that are going to challenge the sophomores because you want to trust those sophomores. You can't really do that it's harder to do that on the offensive line. To find somebody and be like, hey, because you don't rotate like you do at receiver position, so you don't rotate offensive linemen, so you can't say, hey, you can come in and compete. They're probably going to win the job, but you'll be in the rotation potentially. You can't do that on offensive line.
Yeah.
Maybe on defensive line you could do that, and that's where you get Gavin Meyer. You get Nate Clifton, but you don't necessarily get was it Derek Harmon?
Derek Harmon of Oregon.
Yeah, or Dominic Williams, those guys that were going to be the high dollar, $1 million guys or whatever you may be. And one of the big things is, if you want to take the optimistic view, is maybe they've been through the worst now. Those guys have taken their lumps, all those sophomores, all those second-year guys, and now they learn from it, and they start their incline. And you start seeing signs, and maybe that was what we saw from Alani Noah, of him having his best game last week. He's taking lumps, in the first couple games of the season. And maybe we start seeing him start to ascend a little bit. Which is one of the things that is a danger there is a loss of confidence before you get to that point. Because if you don't have confidence, you can't start getting better. And Zach Branch is probably the biggest example of a guy that it just seems like he has lost his confidence out there.
Yeah.
And it seems like he's a step slow because of it. It just and it feels like maybe he just needs one play. You get him in the end zone, and suddenly everything comes back, and the sky turns from gray to blue, whatever. And so I asked Lincoln Riley about that today, and he said you got to keep investing in them as people. You keep investing in them as players, spending extra time with them. A lot of times when you do that, these guys are able to make the improvements that that they have inside them. So they know these guys like Zach Branch or Elijah Page are capable of being really good players, but you've taken some lumps. Can you keep your confidence up so that you can build and, take those as lessons versus take them as beatdowns, and don't look at social media and what everyone's trying to tell you that you're not any good anymore or whatever. And I thought it was interesting that when I asked him that, Lincoln said, sometimes schematic, sometimes it's scheduling, sometimes you got to be Dr. Phil with them. So
yes.
You got to do a little bit of coaching in different ways. And he said that's one of the things where if you have guys that have been there 3 years, You know the way they tick. You know the way to talk to them, all that type of stuff. And even Caleb Williams was talking about, him talking to some of the receivers and stuff and knowing who you can yell at, who you got to pacify, who you got to be monotone with to be able to get your point across. And if you've got guys for 3 years, you know how to do all those things as a coaching staff versus you bring in a transfer, you say the wrong thing and they get all pissy or they go into the dumps and suddenly you've lost a year.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting to see, if you want to take an optimistic view, this team has the potential to get a lot better because there are a lot of young guys they're relying on that have talent that have not fully developed yet.
I think my favorite story on the offensive line is the fact that Elijah Page last year was obviously a heralded recruit, got moved to the scout team in the middle of the year because they just weren't seeing what they wanted to from him. They didn't feel like he had that killer instinct that they were looking for him to have as a potential program left tackle of the future. He fought back after being on the scout team. It really lit a fire under him, and he surged back to get that starting spot in the Holiday Bowl. This year he gets benched at halftime of the Michigan game, and I think ever since getting back on the field after that, he's been significantly better. Obviously, he's had some misses, and there was that big one in the Wisconsin game, but he was less of a liability than Mason Murphy was at the other tackle spot against Minnesota. So I think you have to just trust that USC, you hope that these younger guys will get better. We've talked about how on the offensive line, there's nowhere else to turn. You're not going to Gino Quinones, I don't think, at guard. You're not moving Jonah Monheim away from center. I know people have been talking about and asking questions in the chat about what changes can they make to the personnel? How can they change the starting five on the offensive line? I think it's not going to happen. That would be my guess, is that they're going to roll with these five guys. We saw it in practice again this week. That will be the group that starts against Penn State. I'm almost 99% certain, and I just have a feeling that they're going to have to stick with that group of five. Maybe you switch in a Tobias Raymond for Mason Murphy, but then you're making the offensive line even younger and bringing in more of these guys that have to grow from this point on. And I think once you get past week 6, you really don't want to bring in newer, younger guys who then have to learn to grow in the back half of the season.
And I think for Michigan, when you play that, defensive line, you're going to be your toughest test of the year. The defensive tackles are elite. And then playing Penn State, probably they're going to be the toughest defensive ends that you're going to face all year. So it's a little bit different. And USC's defensive ends had a lot of USC's tackles had a lot of problem with Minnesota's defensive ends in the last game. And you saw 3-man pressures getting there off the edge. That Miller Moss interception, I don't even know if that guy was touched on his way in. And it was just like, you can't give up that kind of pressure, especially you're only rushing 3 guys. Penn State can do it. They're very deep. They're athletic. This is going to be the toughest test probably for this USC offensive line that's beleaguered right now. They're not doing well. They're coming off a couple of bad games, or the Michigan game and the Minnesota game, road games. They're going to have to play a lot better in this one because Penn State is no joke. They're, I think, the fastest team to get to the quarterback in the country. USC is one of the worst as far as allowing pressures to happen. So this is a nightmare matchup. So what you need is just go out and play. Like you said, like Elijah Page got, lit a fire under him after he was put on the scout team. Well, he's going to need that again and keep getting better. Same thing, across the line. Jonah Monheim leading all those guys. That's what you're going to need, because if you don't get good play on the offensive line, there's no way you're winning this game. So, and Lincoln Riley putting pressure on him to assist in any way possible. However you can kind of mask the deficiencies that you have on the offensive line with play calling and whatever you're going to do, you got to do it. You have to pull out all the stops in this one, because this is going to be a nightmare matchup, and you just can't let Penn State wreak havoc in the backfield. Or what they're averaging, like 7 tackles for loss a game. They are in the backfield all the time. That's a problem for this USC offensive line. So you got to get better. No more excuses. Like, you lost to Minnesota, 1 play away, all that crap. Who cares? Just go out and beat Penn State. I don't care how you do it, whatever you got to do. You get paid a lot of money. Go figure it out. Beat Penn State. That's what I think.
Yeah, they have 4 guys that have 12 pressures or more. Anthony Lucas leads USC with 9. They have a backup that has 12 pressures this season.
That's insane.
Now, they have had 51 the last 2 games. They didn't have that many against Bowling Green, against Kent State. But against Illinois and UCLA, they've had 51 the last 2 games for them. And it starts with the three main guys. Abdul Carter is the one you probably heard of the most.
Yeah.
He's the guy that's got the sacks and everything else. But then you have Zane Durant, who's a guy who's making himself a ton of money at defensive tackle. And that is the bigger concern to me.
Oh.
Because what USC has struggled with against Minnesota was just one thing, the wide nine. So what I mean by that is, there's a zero tech and you go all the way out across the line. The wide nine is someone who's lined up, 5 is at the tackle, 7 is off the tackle, 9 is further off than that.
Yeah.
So that it means you're in an obvious passing situation. You put your defensive ends as far back as possible, and then they can take a straight line basically at Miller Moss as he's dropping back. So one of the things that you're going to have to be able to step up in the pocket to try to avoid that and maybe try to help those tackles out a little bit there. But if Zane Durant is able to push the pocket back on him, it throws everything off.
Yeah.
They were able to protect up the middle last game. Alani Noah, again, having his best game. They picked up blitzes much better. They picked up, stunts much better. That's something I sent Ryan a bunch of pressure numbers, and there's different numbers on PFF. There's the total number for each individual and the team as a total. But then you compare that with plays that you actually got pressure on, and somehow there's less snaps. Okay, well, multiple guys can get a pressure on one play, right? Well, then you look at different. There's just 3 or 4 different numbers that you can look at, and total pressures. Penn State has 200 right now, or 100. Excuse me. They're averaging 20 per game.
Yeah, that's a lot.
USC's at like 11 or something per game. Not that, or even less than that probably.
And 4 last week.
Yeah, not good. But USC's only pressures last week that they gave up were on the tackles, and those were all coming out from the wide. One of them was Elijah Page trying to pick up a blitzer who just juked him and went by the Mason Murphy that led to the interception. But can you slowly make an adjustment to that? Is there something you can do to help out there? And can you stop Zane Durant from pushing the pocket and wreaking havoc up front with Jonah Monheim? Because that was the thing with Michigan. Josiah Stewart was a monster coming off the edge, but it was also Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham in the front to where Miller Moss couldn't step up and get away, because Miller Moss did a pretty good job against Minnesota outside of the 2 times he was hit without being able to see the play coming, of stepping up and avoiding the rush a little bit, and that helps out your tackles, especially if they take those really wide lines and stuff. So can they help out there? And the other guy you should mention for Penn State is Dennis Sutton or Denise Sutton. His name is D-A-N-I, but it's Denai. He's got 19 pressures already.
Yikes.
USC, Anthony Lucas leads USC with 9. No one else has more than 6.
Yeah. So USC gives up pressure. Penn State creates pressure. And that's why
that seems like a not great
And
combination.
USC allows it is quicker than any team in college football, and Penn State's like the second quickest to get to the quarterback when they get pressure.
Yeah, so it's insane. And I think what happened last week, I think P.J. Fleck came in with a game plan. They figured out a way, like they were desperate, right? They needed a win. They couldn't get a win in the Big Ten. It's, they hadn't had one since last year. You come up with a plan, you execute it, and you get the win. They rush the field, boom. I think that's what you have to see from Lincoln Riley and the coaching staff this week. Like, you guys are smart. You know that offense stuff. We can talk about what the Elijah Page needs to do, or Mason Murphy, or all that stuff, or where we think guys should be playing. They get paid the big bucks. This is the week. You just figure it out.
Really
like,
big.
What do you have to do to beat this Penn State team? What do you have to do knowing that you really stink at giving up pressure to the quarterback, and they're really freaking good at it? What do you do as a coach to fix it? Like, above all of our pay grades. Like, these are the guys that need to go figure it out. I want to see, and even if it doesn't work, I just want to see a game plan. Like, oh, they're obviously doing this. They're doing these trap draws, or doing these screens here. What stuff that they weren't doing before to try to, like, you're seeing them try to combat the pressure that will be coming. And they'd be like, okay, I see what they were trying to do. Oh, it worked. That's great. Or it didn't work, but but at least they were trying something. I just don't want to see the same ball rolled out there and just see Miller Moss running for his life and that happen again. I want to see something different that you can do, whatever the strategy-wise. When we're talking about the game, you're like, oh, USC did this. They ran the ball 60% of the time, and they ran the ball on first down all the time, and whatever it was. And then you're like, okay, they had a different strategy for this game to try to combat Penn State's pressure. And I want to see that. We'll see. And, if you give credit if they try something and it doesn't work, but like, hey, we saw them. This was their game plan. They were trying to do something. It still didn't work. They lost to Penn State. But I want to see something attempted here to help out all these deficiencies we've been talking about.
I'm curious to see Penn State's game plan. Minnesota's game plan worked really well, which was keep the safeties way back, nothing over the top. USC did not have explosive plays. You guys keep mentioning their biggest play was this 21-yard run. It was a 9-yard run. It fumbled 12 yards forward. Stop giving Quentin Joyner credit for 12 extra yards.
That's a good point.
A fumble.
It is, but it was marked as a 20. How much is that? Like the longest play for USC from scrimmage was kicked. The ball was kicked 12 yards and recovered by the opponent. So like yes, like that's bad.
run.
That's bad. Like they haven't been good. What 3 plays over 40 yards this year, and last year they were like best in the country at doing that. Like you can figure it out. You know, like Miller Moss is talented enough. The receivers are talented enough. The running backs are talented enough. Like
it's all on the offensive line to give them time.
But I'm curious to see if Penn State comes out and tries to pressure, whether they think they can sit back and, hey, we can just let 3 or 4 guys go to work, or they bring up and play some press coverage because they want to give those guys extra time to pressure, or they bring extra blitzers. And then that gives USC's offense a little bit more opportunity to get going because now it's one-on-one matchups. You trust Mekhi Lemon to run a jerk route like he did on that one that I posted on Twitter, just making the defender look bad. You trust Deuce Robinson in a one-on-one, a slot fade, which we saw in the Wisconsin game, which was also the pass that was being thrown when Miller Moss got hit for the interception. You trust Jacoby Lane to be able to go up and get that whole shot in between 2 defenders. Like you trust your receivers to go do that, but Minnesota's defensive plan was to keep the safeties really far back and just come up and hit everything and make you throw short and dink and dunk your way down, bend but don't break. And I also think on the USC side, to jump to the defense side, will we see more of the bend but don't break because Penn State has more weapons than Minnesota or Wisconsin, where you could play press and you play cover 0 and Jacoby Covington gets beat against Wisconsin. There's nobody back there to help out. Maybe they do more like they did in LSU, where it was okay. They got a lot of they were completing a lot of passes, but everything was in front of them, and then they got tight. They tightened up in the red zone and forced field goals, and got off the field on 4th down. So I'm curious to see if Denton Lynn switches up his his defensive game plan based on Penn State having more skill guys, and the fact that they got someone like Nick Singleton, who should be back this week after missing last week's game, who is a missed tackle waiting to happen.
Yes.
They got to tackle a lot better than they did against Minnesota. Obviously, Darius Taylor, I think is what his name was, the running back, is really good. 200 total yards, though, and a lot of those come on missed tackles and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there are 2 things that you can do to specifically go against that wide 9 formation that Shotgun was talking about. First of all, the defense isn't able to run that without defensive tackles that can stop the run, and defensive tackles that can stop the run without a lot of help from the edges, which Michigan had, and that's why they were able to run that formation a lot. So I think USC has to commit to the run a little bit more. I think the other thing that they need to do is tire out the defense. I don't think they did a very good job of that at all against Minnesota. They didn't run tempo, and maybe it's because it was on the road in a different environment, but that shouldn't be a problem this week. Miller Moss mentioned to us on I think it was Tuesday, Minnesota did a great job limiting the possessions. They held the ball, it felt like, till 1 second on the play clock every time. USC was doing the same thing offensively. They obviously wanted to get the right play call in, get the protection set, not have false start penalties, not have trouble with the crowd. But that meant that USC didn't run tempo whatsoever. When they had success against Michigan in the second half, it was when they kept the defense on the field. They converted on 3rd downs. They kept moving the football. They tired out the defensive line. And then they beat the depth of Michigan when some of those guys like Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant had to be subbed out. They couldn't do it in the first half at all against Michigan. They did it in the second half. I don't think that at any point during the game they did that against Minnesota all that well. So Minnesota's number 1 guys got to stay out there for the majority of the game. They didn't really tire them out. USC's possessions were limited, and the time of possession battle, I'm pretty sure, went Minnesota's way. So we talk about these studs that Penn State has and their ability to get after the passer. I think, first of all, you have to slow them down. Lincoln Riley has to commit to the run because USC, in terms of rushing yards per carry, is right up there with the best teams in the Big Ten. The thing is, the attempts are super low. And I get they want to be a passing team, and when given time, they've been a successful passing team. But I think you have to commit to running the football. And then number 1 thing is just don't make the mistakes that end drives prematurely, because the more you do that, the more you give the other team time on defense to catch their breath, to rest up, and to eventually, in the 4th quarter, be the team that can win the war of attrition. That is less fatigued than you on the other side of the football. And I think that's one of the ways that you can slow down some of these stars. You just tire them out. You run tempo. You are the home team. what have we talked about when USC's gone on the road this year and all the troubles that presents? Penn State has to go on the road this week. USC needs to do everything that it can to make sure that's a tough trip, not only travel-wise, but also just being the road team for Penn State.
Yeah, I think tempo is important, and I was listening to the Helium Boys when you were talking about a lot of the times USC didn't snap the ball until there was 5 seconds left, and something I really didn't notice, but that sort of seemed to play into what Minnesota was trying to do, slowing the game down. And I think one way you can combat it is like, hey, we're going to run some tempo, and we're going to go quick, and maybe keep a defense off balance a little bit. But I was curious why they didn't do that. So we'll see if they run a little bit more tempo.
So my theory is, and didn't get a chance to ask about this week, but my theory is that because they had so many issues at Michigan with a road crowd, and you heard Lincoln, I think it was on Trojans Live this week, or maybe it was his scrum, he mentioned on Tuesday, he mentioned that he messed up the offensive line with the silent count.
Oh.
So, they took the crowd out of the game completely until that interception. Like, it was dead in there. I was talking to Chris on the sideline. I'm like, there is no energy in this building at all.
It sounded like Minnesota had the football. Like, it sounded like a Minnesota offensive drive when USC had it.
And
I think they were just expecting to lose, too. This wasn't like...
They were.
Yeah.
And USC, because that opening drive the second half, they go down and score. And then the drive where they are, they throw the interception, they have the ball, and they're picking up every third down along the way. And they're just bleeding. They're taking the heart out of Minnesota until you give them life. And they gave them life, and suddenly things turn around, and then you don't have any depth on the defense side, and they were able to get the wheels going, and the momentum turns around, and suddenly it got loud in there. But I think that was all part of the strategy is like, all right, we're going to take the crowd out so that we can, we don't have any false starts and have any of those issues like that they had at Michigan. And I think that game plan worked until it didn't, I guess.
Yeah.
So when it didn't work, maybe did you try something different then? It's hard to be like, all right, this is working. We have one bad play. Do we switch things up now? Or it's hard to make that call. But maybe that's something that we see different in them this week is that you're at home. You have an opportunity to run tempo. If you want to try to, keep certain defenders on the field with certain personnel, do you try to do that? Do you try to run tempo in spurts? There's different ways you can go about it. Or do you try to go slow and limit the possessions because maybe you feel like you're not as talented as Penn State because of the depth issues that you have. When you're the less talented team, you want less possessions. Over the course of time, more possessions equals talent runs out. So that was the whole thought process of Chip Kelly with the blur offense at Oregon. It's like, we're going to be faster than everybody. We're going to do it, and we're going to catch you off guard, but we're going to be more talented. So eventually our talent is going to win out. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on is what kind of tempo does USC try to go with? Or do they mix it up? Does it stay the same? Do they make some adjustments? How does it kind of go? Does it flow with the game itself, or is there a specific tempo that they're looking to establish early in the game?
I think Ryan's point at the top of the show was a good one, that USC scoring points, like the offense might be the best defense today or tomorrow or on Saturday. I wonder if Lincoln Riley this year has known they have a better defense, so he's tried to help that defense out, and maybe he's been more conservative at times, knowing that, hey, I can actually trust my defense to go out there and get a stop more often than not this year compared to the last 2 years. And maybe that's messing with the offense a little bit too. So I wonder if this is the week where they say, hey, Danton Lynn, I know that you can go do your job. Our offense isn't clicking on all cylinders right now. We need to get back to running tempo. We need to get back to doing certain things and go out there. And maybe this is the week where USC's not trying to win that perfect Big Ten game where they win 24-17. Maybe this is the week where Lincoln Riley tries to get back to form as well and just put up a lot of points. Because I think I agree with Ryan. USC's defense will struggle a little bit, especially with Penn State's run game. Drew Aller's obviously a phenomenal quarterback that you can't expect to play a perfect game defensively, so you can't try and make that the game script as well, where, hey, as long as we get to this certain amount of points, our defense will hold up, and they won't allow more than that. I think this is the week where, as the home team, in a big matchup where you are the underdog, the best defense might be, getting back to a Lincoln Riley offense.
I think he's got to be frustrated. If you're Lincoln Riley, quarterback guru.
You're 5-7 in your last 12 games. You better damn well be frustrated.
You should be frustrated. You got to score
Wouldn't
points.
be bowl eligible if that was a season.
There's things that are wrong, and if we want to do, people like the food analogies, or maybe they don't, but I always do them anyway. You're a steakhouse, and you're known, and your steaks are amazing. It's a medium rare porterhouse, whatever it is, and it's freaking awesome. you get these Yelp reviews, and they're like, man, my asparagus was wilted, and the salad dressings that tasted sour or whatever it is, but like, man, my steak was good. And that's sort of been like USC's offense. Like, the steak's going to be great. Like, everything else around it, like, why is there's cockroaches in the corner? Like, my napkin's dirty. There's a lot of crap wrong in this restaurant, but man, the steaks were good. And now you're like, hey, you cleaned everything up. And like, well, the asparagus is like very good. And it's like everything, this is so well seasoned. The salad dressing's perfect. But my steak's overdone. Like, what is going on? Like, it has to be for the chef that's like, I'm a madman when it comes to making steaks, but everything else in my restaurant was shitty. I'm going to go out and fix that stuff. Now, why are my steaks bad? So I feel like that's what's going on with USC right now. Like, Lincoln Riley, you're the offensive guru. Go fix this. Go make it better. You have to have a better offense than what we're seeing right now. We're 5 games in. You're not even averaging 30 points a game. I get it's the Big Ten. Dantlin could do his stuff. I think now you just have to let him, like Jack said, just let him do his thing. Let him go make his asparagus. He'll clean up make sure the napkins are all folded perfectly and everything. You make a damn good steak. Just go make a steak, and let's see what happens. Just score freaking points. That's all.
Oh, that's all. Maybe Danton Lynn, to go back to Jack's comment about tempo, maybe Danton Lynn, when he came in, said, hey, I need you to slow things down. Mm-hmm. And remember, Lincoln Riley was like, well, we're going to listen to everything they have to say, take into maybe that's part of it.
Don't listen anymore.
But if you're looking at tempo for this game in particular, the more plays you run, the more chances you give Abdul Carter or Denise Sutton to come off the edge and win a one-on-one and game change something. So do you want to do that? How confident do you feel in your offensive line? How confident do you feel in your running backs to chip, your tight ends to stay in and help block? We've seen more of that since the first half of Michigan. After the first half, they kept the tight end in more. They used it in a block. And I think because you don't have a true threat as much with Lake McCree not being in there, you're seeing Cade Eldridge stay in to block a little bit more. You've seen them split out Woody Marks as a receiver and keep the tight end in. That's not something they've done in the past. So going back through my charts and stuff, that's not something they've done previously. Like, we're going to have a 6th blocker. There's not going to be the running back. There's going to be no threat of an actual run here because our quarterback's not going to run, and there's no running back here. It's an empty set, but the tight end's going to stay in to help block. At that point, do you just go with extra lineman then?
I don't know.
I mean, there's different ways you can go about it. But so it'll be interesting to see how they kind of attack it. And do you want to go tempo and somebody doesn't get the right snap count or whatever, and 1/2 a second that you don't get off the ball, that's coming from the blind side. That's a trouble. That's a trouble danger area for Miller Moss.
Just because you're running tempo doesn't mean every play has to be a pass. Exactly, you can run tempo and run the ball. I do think, I understand maybe Danton Lynn did come in and say, hey, I work better defensively when we get 3 more minutes on the bench to rest. So if you can slow down the drive a little bit, that would be great. USC's converting so well on 3rd downs right now that it feels like their drives would still be semi-long, even using tempo.
Some super long drives. They're like 8-minute drives. I'm like,
yeah. Well, and they're going
how can you have air raid 8 minutes? Mike Leach would have been.
No, he's rolling over. It's great.
And that's doing
RIP to Mike. He was great.
Doing some part to the fact that Minnesota made him run 15, 16 plays a drive. Yep. So you can't get him in big chunks. But using tempo, I think, would open up some of those big plays as well.
Yeah,
the
I think you have to figure out a way, Jack. Just because, they dropped 2 safeties, you can't have a big play. No, that's stupid. You have to figure out a way for the longest play to be 21 yards fumble, 12 of it being kick ball. No, I think that's just not good enough. You have to go out and figure out a way. You have plenty of athletes on this team.
I have a way.
Go make a big play. I would love to hear your way.
Screens. You run the screen the right way and get the blockers. That's the thing is, even the screens that they pick up yardage, the offensive lineman may get 6-7 yards down the field, but don't actually block anybody.
Yeah. And
you think, if they picked up that guy, what's the path then for the ball carrier? Well, it looks pretty open. Or he's got one man to make miss. I think there's one stat that has baffled me. I think RJ had it in a story today or yesterday about the receivers.
Okay.
Zachariah Branch right now has.
Is this PFF?
Yeah.
It's great. As we're looking up stats here, that's good for you. But it's a good one. So you want to
he has. I can't remember. I can't find it right now. But
okay.
He's catching the ball and his average yards after carry or after a catch are just not where you would think they would be. And even when he's running these screens and stuff, like there seems like there should be more yards out there than what he's getting. And so him in particular, like, can you find a way to get him loose? Now, I will also say, anytime he goes in motion or anytime they try to run screens to him, there is extra attention. You see it when there's a safety over top. He is still garnering a ton of attention from defenses, even though he's got the most targets on the team, but, has not been explosive the way we know he can be. And, and people keep saying what's wrong with him. He's still, he's 7 yards off the lead for the team lead in, receiving yards right now. So he's still making some plays, but we just haven't seen that big one yet.
No, people have been playing him in the video game going like, oh, he's going bananas. Like, he's not going bananas on the field.
They're going 250 yards in a game with him.
Yeah, not a season.
The receiving yards after the catch, I was talking with Connor about this earlier in the week. Like, we saw Mekhi Lemon make a couple plays after the catch this week, and I was like, that's the first time I can really say this season they're making plays after the catch. Zachariah Branch had one on a screen in week 1 against LSU, but nobody's really doing much with the ball in their hands after the catch. Meanwhile, in years past, you're seeing Taj Washington and Brendan Rice and Jordan Addison and even Zachariah Branch last year doing stuff with the ball in their hands after the catch. I think in the first couple weeks that was due in large part to the receiver blocking just was not as good as it has been in the last couple of years, especially with some of those veteran guys that really took it personally and wanted to make sure that they were blocking just as hard as they were working as a receiver. But I think also you're looking at who you're throwing the ball to. Defenses know that's part of the offense. I felt like USC's best screen last week might have gone to Kyle Ford. And Lincoln Riley, I think, was realizing so many people are keyed in on Zachariah Branch when we try and throw these plays. We have other receivers that maybe you start with the screens to the guys that are a little bit less suspecting, and then you open up the rest of the offense. But all of these points, I think, come down to blocking, whether it's on the offensive line, on the outside. So I think the question is, do you trust USC can, A, get better blocking this week against Penn State, or use tempo and just try and get the explosive plays that way by catching Penn State off guard or tiring them out? I feel like the second option there is probably more likely of a 1-week change than USC starts to just magically block better against the team that's probably hardest to block on the schedule so far, but that's just me.
I think blocking's certainly been a problem, and some of the, like Shotgun was saying, offensive linemen peeling off and not really getting a block once they get out in space to open things up. Receivers blocking downfield, but I think some of the either play design or play call too don't seem to, like, when you have guys running sideways on the short side of the field towards the sideline, and it's a Lake McCree who's not going to like turn and like maybe Zachariah Branch can turn and burn, but Lake McCree is just getting stopped right where he catches the ball, and it's behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage, and that's what was baffling in the Michigan game. He did like 4 of those plays and then ends up getting hurt on one of them. And it didn't seem like, why are you throwing to a tight end who's not going to, like, he's not, it was great when he's catching the ball 10 yards down the field. Like, I think people are paying attention to Zachariah Branch, and Lake McCree's wide open. You just throw it to him, you've already got the 10 yards. I'm not sure why you're throwing it to him at the line of scrimmage. And they kept doing that, and it didn't work, and he ends up getting hurt. Some of the play design, I think they haven't put the players in a great position to run after the catch, too. So I think that's some on the coaching side, but some on the blocking side, too.
And some on the guys just not getting vertical, when they do catch the ball and go inside to side a little bit too much, hoping for another block and not getting it. But, they could throw that same screen to Kyle Ford instead of Lake McCree or Kyron Hudson. They ran some of those quick screens because there's 2 thoughts when you run a screen. You run it to the short and shifty guy that can make a guy miss, or you run it to the big guy that can run through a tackle.
Yeah,
Drake London is magnificent in the screen game because he's gonna fall forward, and he's so tall he's gonna get 3 yards immediately, and then he's probably gonna run through the first tackle, so he's gonna get another 5 yards. So he's getting 8 yards almost every play, and that's why it was so easy to throw the ball to him in every different variation when he was at USC.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions in here. We didn't get a lot after the first stream went down, but we can get to a couple of those and then give our final picks for the game. But Tony on YouTube said, can USC stop Penn State's run game? The Lions' offensive line is pretty salty. And I know that was kind of a big piece of the game that we haven't exactly got to yet.
Yeah, I think I think this defense has done pretty well. I mean, LSU's offensive line is really salty, and USC knew they were going to try to run the ball and shut that down. I think for the most part, USC's done a really good job stopping the run. Minnesota was the most concerning, and maybe it's Eric Gentry not being in there. So we'll see. I mean, if Eric Gentry's not available again, which we don't think he's going to be, what can you do on the defensive side to kind of slow down I think what they were really good at is like they made some stops. It would be like maybe they give a big play, but 2 of the 3 of those plays on that drive weren't successful. And I think last year and the year before, there was just like successful play after successful play. And I think USC was enough to force a negative play or get a stop, a 2-yard gain as opposed to like an 8-yard gain. They were doing that really well. It's kind of backed off a little bit of that against Minnesota, where they were getting, big plays, not big plays, but like they were getting 6 yards a carry instead of, 3. So they got to try to do that against Penn State. If they can't, and it might be tough without Eric Gentry, but it's going to be a long day if they can't do that.
I don't think that Penn State's offensive line is anything special. They're fine. I don't think that they have as many quality players as the LSU line. Now, I think they're more cohesive from the little bit I've watched of them. But the difference is Nick Singleton breaks tackles. Kaytron Allen is not as explosive as Nick Singleton, but he also breaks some tackles. So that's the biggest thing. Can you make tackles? And then that, to me, comes down to, one, your players need to make plays that you expect to, but can your depth players also make plays? Can they make that tackle when they're asked to? Or are you putting everything? Because one of the things I mentioned on the Helium Boys podcast is like USC did not get off blocks at all in that Minnesota game. And so therefore you put a ton of onus on your middle linebackers to make every play. And
they had like 25 tackles.
Exactly. But they also had some missed tackles.
Yeah.
They also ran to the wrong gap every once in a while. You're putting a ton of onus on them instead of, hey, someone from the defensive line can actually get in the backfield and create the tackle to begin with. Jalen Smith coming off the edge a couple times on blitzes was able to get home and do some things. I think Greedy Vance, I highlighted one play, terrific play where he's being tackled and he still makes the tackle. So maybe that's an option too, is to bring some of those secondary guys down in to help out. But, it starts up front. Can you get off some blocks and help make some plays? Even if your job is to just hold the line, can you do a little bit more?
Yeah. Don't
try to do too much. We're not asking you to get to the passer every single down as a defensive lineman. It could be a run play. But, do your job, and then after you succeed in doing your job, can you do a little bit more? That's what it takes to get a top 5 upset.
Yeah, and one thing that Penn State will do is absolutely commit to the run. If USC is not stopping the run, Penn State will commit to the run. And I think that they've seen the game plan that Minnesota laid out, Michigan laid out, Wisconsin tried for a little bit but didn't exactly succeed in. Run the ball until USC proves that it can stop it. In that second half against Michigan, USC was stopping the run very well. Michigan just didn't have anything else to turn to, so they kept doing it, and then they popped one big run. Minnesota, USC, it didn't even feel like at any point they were stopping the run well, so Minnesota never went away from it. I think USC's pass defense has been really good this year because that's been a strength, but they're not going to try and throw the ball all over until USC proves it can stop the run. Maybe that's something that Lincoln Riley has done in the past, and we said and kind of criticized him for it in the loss to Minnesota, where they were running the ball well, but know they're a good passing team, so they went to throwing the ball, and then that's when Minnesota got back into the game. Penn State won't make that same mistake. They will commit to running the ball as much as they can until USC proves that they can stop it.
Can you make 8-yard runs be 8-yard runs instead of 20-yard runs?
Yeah.
Make the tackle. If they get through the second line of defense, make the tackle. If your safety sets come up, make the tackle. If you stop those from turning into explosive runs, then it makes it that much more difficult on offense to put together a 13, 14, 15-yard drive.
Yeah.
In college, it's very rare that happens. Teams just make mistakes, whether it's a false start, a holding, whatever, or in this conference where there's no penalties called, whether it's a drop or whatever else. Teams make mistakes. College kids make mistakes. So can you bend but don't break? I think that might be the philosophy for this game is to, all right, we're going to play a little bit deeper. Nothing gets over us, but we got to be sure tacklers when you come up. That's got to be the case all the time, but I feel like that should be that much more of an emphasis this week for Denton.
Steve says, is it a hot take to take play calling duties away from Lincoln Riley?
Yes.
Yeah. He also, who's taking it away? He's the head coach.
Yeah, that's what he does. He makes the steak. Unless you fire the chef, he's making the steak no matter what. You're not like the sous chef or whatever. The guy's not coming from the garde manger station and saying, I'm going to start cooking the meat. The guy's like, no, dude, I'm the head chef. I make the steaks. You're out. So there's no one taking away his play calling duties unless somehow he gets fired.
Jasper says, will this be the game where the USC offense comes out in the first half and look like they've played in the second halves?
I mean, they didn't score the last 17 minutes of the game or something, right? Or yeah. So I don't know about the Wisconsin. Yes, Minnesota. No. And like Shotgun said, penultimate drives have been fruitless since the opener. So I don't know. I think it's just more a consistent play and avoiding the massive mistake. It's not like, but you want to come out and play well. I think this is one of those things where this is a number 4 team in the country. Do you want to go down 21-10 and have like that? You're probably not doing that. Like, you can do that against Wisconsin. I don't think you're doing it against Penn State. You got to punch them in the mouth. You got to come out and score, get a stop, fumble, something, and show hey, USC's come to play and reset things. Don't just get rolled in the first drive or two.
Also, that would play into the gameplay a lot better for USC. You get advantage. Okay, now they can't run the ball as much. They have to throw the ball more. Drew Aller has the least amount of pass attempts in the conference per game, 20 per game. Even though he's got a big arm, is a pro prospect, maybe I loved him in Elite 11. He was one of my favorite quarterbacks coming out, and had been with a terrible offense before. Now Colton Nicky has really turned that offense around, but they're not asking him to do too much. They haven't been put in that situation. They haven't been away from home.
Yeah.
So
they went to Morgantown.
It's like a 2-hour drive, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like USC going to UCLA.
Yeah.
But I guess a little bit more than that. But anyways, they've had
traffic.
They mentioned on our sister site, the Lions 247, one of their podcasts I listened to this week. They're coming off the 4-game home stretch. Is this baseball? Who gets a 4-game home stretch in football?
Michigan 5. They did 5.
Good grief.
And
what
then
is
look,
this?
they go on the road and lose their first road game.
One
Shocking.
game.
Exactly. That's my point. Is that they're going on the road. They've been home this whole time. First time flying to the West Coast. They're going an extra day. They got to drive to Harrisburg. Oh, it's a big deal. They got to drive to Harrisburg to catch their plane because of this short runway. Whatever. It's different for them. Okay, we'll put them in uncomfortable positions by taking a lead early, and then suddenly, okay, now they got to throw the ball around. Put them in that position. Now USC that plays in, USC, you don't have to throw the ball. They can't widen out the defensive ends. They can't, pin their ears back and come at you. You can run the ball more when you're – all those things would be greatly benefited for USC if they can get out to an early lead.
Yep.
And also Penn State, also listening to the Lions 247 podcast, has been really good in the third quarter this year.
Yeah.
I think it's I don't know what the exact – I don't know if Jack knows the exact numbers, but I think it was 3 points given up in the third quarter. I don't know. Something really low or whatnot. But, yeah, put them in uncomfortable positions and avoid having to go into the third quarter, a quarter that they've done really well this season, and be all right, we got to turn it on now, which has been what it's felt like for them every halftime. It's all right, we got to turn it on. Stop trying to turn things on and play up to that level to begin with.
Yeah.
Especially and realize you're probably not going to be able to turn it on against Penn State as well as you have against other teams. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think Shotgun makes a great point. And we didn't talk about the travel during the episode, but if you want to buy into the stat, Big Ten teams are 1-7 when traveling 2 or more times.
I think 1-8 actually.
Which one was the 8th team? Because I know John Wilner put it out when USC lost and it was 1-7. What team lost after that?
Not after.
His was including ACC, I think, as well.
Maybe because UCLA went to LSU and lost it. I don't know if you include that. So it wasn't a Big Ten game. It was a Big Ten team. That could have been the one. But
either way, the only win is Indiana coming and beating UCLA.
Yeah.
So if
UCLA
you want to
was involved in 3 of them. So, yeah.
If you want to buy into that narrative, that's a potential thing that could plague Penn State as well. And Connor and I talked about it on Instant Analysis. If you see USC beat Penn State and Oregon beat Ohio State, I'm totally willing to have that conversation that the travel is
this is
maybe
the week.
A cause. I don't know if I'm going to say that yet. USC didn't play very well. UCLA has gone and lost a couple of times. Would UCLA have won those games on a neutral field? Right in the middle of the two schools, probably not. But if the two highest ranked teams, 2 of the 3 highest ranked teams in the conference go on the road, cross country, and lose, I'm willing to have the conversation after that.
Yeah, because they probably won't play well. No one has played well. It's not like teams are going they played a great game, they just lost. No, it's they just didn't look right. They came out sluggish. Yeah.
And stuff goes wrong. Like Washington outplayed Rutgers and still lost. They
Can't miss 3
all
field
the,
goals.
Yeah, like a lot of metrics were sort of going away. So there's just,
His legs were tired from flying across the country.
Yeah, so
he probably had
stuff-
jet-lagged legs.
stuff goes wrong. But I think this is the week that trend is bucked. I just think that Ohio State's going to beat Oregon. I think we're going to get into this in a second. I think Penn State's going to beat USC. There was another one too that I thought there was a big travel one. I forget who it is.
Washington or UCLA?
Yeah, you trust Minnesota to come beat UCLA?
Oh yeah, so I thought Minnesota was going to beat UCLA. So like this week, 3 people are traveling multiple time zones, and I think I picked all 3 of them to win and actually cover spreads. So.
All right, before we get into the spread, we had a late super chat come in. We
Ooh,
can
thank
hit
you.
on this one from Ethan, who gave us $5. Thank you, Ethan. We'll be flying in town tomorrow for my first game at the Coliseum. Anything or anywhere you guys suggest I check out before Saturday. Appreciate you guys.
Wow. I mean, LA's huge, so it depends where you're depends where you're staying, where you're coming from, what you've seen. I don't. There's so many.
Don't complicate it. Just give them a couple things.
Philippe's downtown is the original. If you want to do like a cool lunch spot, it's the original French dip sandwich. I love that one.
I'm more of a Kohl's guy downtown for French dip. They have a pastrami French
Philippe's is
dip.
better though.
Park's Finest for Filipino barbecue downtown is amazing. Howlin' Ray's for Nashville Hot Chicken downtown is
Yeah.
amazing as well. That would be my
Alvarado
top 2.
Street, if you like the Mexican stuff, is amazing down there. But I like.
Or any taco stand on the
Yeah.
side of the road
I mean, those are. I mean,
with lines.
Yeah,
what's
if you see lines, then
there's
it's good.
I forget the taco place that's like got Michelin rated that's near USC. That's like it's like you go up with like a tray and order. Man, I forget the name of that place, but it's awesome. It's right near the DMV.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. It's like the
Hot
food
box
court.
or hot box or hot something
Yeah, that's
like that.
yeah.
It's like literally like Michelin rated. It's not none of a star, but it's like it's freaking amazing.
It's all
There's a line-
seafood if that's your thing.
Yes, it's a seafood. It's a hot box or whole box or something like crap. I forget.
Anything else besides food?
What do
Hikes
you want
you would recommend. You're a hiker.
Go play volleyball with Ryan.
Yeah,
at the
come
beach.
to Hermosa Beach. Come check it out. Yeah, I definitely come to South Bay and go to the pier, walk around and stuff. I mean, Santa Monica Pier is like one of the more popular like tourist attractions. I do like even Hollywood and Highland is fun if you want to see the footprints and everything around there.
Grauman's Chinese Theater with the Hollywood stars, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, like that stuff's all pretty cool. I mean, even just going to Rodeo Drive, you can park your car somewhere, walk around, see the stores that are too expensive unless you can afford them. Go over to Sprinkles, though, and get a cupcake at Sprinkles.
Knew this was coming.
Yeah, you have to go to Sprinkles. I know, sorry, there's food and stuff in there. I definitely like doing that. I like the La Brea Tar Pits, like just the history of that, like being in the middle of Los Angeles. And this isn't like dinosaur stuff from like millions of years ago. This is like 10,000 years ago. This is like saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths. That wasn't that long ago. Like right in the middle on Wilshire Boulevard, there's like this huge tar pit where they're like digging out for a parking lot and they find like thousands of fossils there. Oh, we got to stop digging and like take out these chunks and they just go through them. It takes like years to go through these things. And there's so many fossils and there's a museum there and stuff. So some of the things I like if you want to go.
If the game wasn't at 12:30, I would recommend you could go to the Natural History Museum because it's right there.
Oh, yeah.
You could also, either before or after the game, you should get a bacon-wrapped hot dog from a street vendor.
It's a gamble.
It's called a Danger Dog for a reason.
Danger Dog. Oh, Randy's Donuts. Go to Randy's
Oh my
Donuts.
goodness.
Of course, man, it's all the sweets
Yeah.
marked down.
Oh, and Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles I like a lot,
Oh,
too.
that's a great one, too.
And
That's
maybe
pretty
Dodgers game 5 tomorrow. Go
No.
buy tickets.
Nah.
Go see Dodger Stadium.
Yeah, you could do that, I guess. SoFi, there's some stuff there.
Runyon Canyon. You go up to Malibu if you really want to go up to Seal Beach or Zuma. Those great beaches.
Yeah.
Great hike
PV's
areas.
there's a lot of stuff at PV. You can hike and stuff. Terranea is amazing down there.
You can play golf.
Yeah, if you want to play
Ryan.
golf.
Get breakfast at the Pantry. That's my favorite place downtown.
Patriots good. And if you're near USC, Jackson Joe, there's a good place too.
We should
Like-
be sponsored by them by this many times that you've recommended them to either new transfers with our tunnel vision interviews or
Oh yeah,
to
I did.
That's
tell.
the place, if you go on Sunday morning, that's the place you're most likely to see a football player. So if that's interesting to you, Ethan,
But thanks, Ethan. I think you got more than $5 worth of recommendations.
probably he's going to have a headache.
the
trying to think
Grove,
of all the places.
Oh,
my
the Grove
goodness.
is cool.
We're not
Yeah.
done.
random places in West Hollywood because you just go have a drink, go up to a rooftop bar, and there is probably a 10% chance you'll probably see a random celebrity.
Yeah, you could. There's
See
a lot
of them if you go out.
Yeah, if you were here earlier, like go to a TV taping of something, go
Go
see
to-
Jimmy Kimmel, like that's fun.
Go to Price is Right.
I did the Price is
like
Right. You
Ryan
could win
did.
like me. That was great.
And the House of Victory tailgate? You never even
Definitely
mentioned
do
that?
the House of Victory tailgate. That's like and so hopefully they go to brunch menu again. It was pretty good brunch last time.
They got biscuits and gravy on the menu this week, as
That-
well as steak.
Yeah, they had that last time too. They didn't have eggs.
The steak's coming back this week.
They didn't have eggs, so I don't know.
I just saw two things. I saw steak
The
and I saw
biscuits and
biscuits and
gravy are
gravy, and
pretty
I
good.
was like,
Yeah.
Ryan better put me on this list.
Well, I'm thinking about it. All right.
All right, here we go. Trek Ranger asks, score predictions. At the end of the show, like to go through them. Ryan, the score that we're using for the staff picks is 5.5.
5.5.
I
Penn
want to
State's
say
favorite.
someone in the chat said Vegas is down to 3.5, so maybe some late money coming in on
Oh.
USC. But you have clearly already formulated your prediction. What's the score prediction that you're expecting?
So I'm 3-2 picking USC with the spread, and I've picked USC to cover every week. They covered 3. They've lost 2. They had a miracle cover against Wisconsin. That was literally it
Bad
made
beat.
SVP's bad beat segment. Like that's how bad it was. So
Quit your whining.
no, but I covered. I got it right. But I'm saying it was a miracle.
He benefited from
I
that
benefit
beat.
from it, but
Connor
it was,
and Chris were whining.
yes,
And me
yes.
too.
I'm not whining about it, but I'm acknowledging that it was a miracle cover. When they played the quality team that they were not favored against, LSU, and they covered, they end up winning that game. I think this one, I don't like the way USC is trending right now. I think they can do a lot of things that we talked about and go out and win this game. The people that are saying, like, there's no way they're going to win, like, you haven't watched college football. Of course they can go out and win. But if I'm going to, like, put money on it or I'm going to bet, like, the way I'm seeing USC trend now and what Penn State's done, I'm going to take Penn State 31-20. But I feel like
31-20.
yeah, I feel like USC can do this. But
Not really.
no, but I mean, it's not like impossible. I can see a path to it, but I think it's more likely if things just go like normal, then I think Penn State's just going to come in, generate way too much pressure. They'll score enough points, and USC is going to lose. But I could see it happening. What if Penn State just comes out flat? They've played all these games at home or in Morgantown. The travel thing, all that stuff. USC comes out and plays well. They don't make critical mistakes. I'm just not banking on all those things happening. It could. I mean, it certainly could. But I think Penn State's going to cover this one. First game this year, I'll pick USC not to cover.
I got USC covering.
Wow. All right.
I don't know if they win. I feel very torn about this. I can see them getting blown out because they can't handle the defensive front.
I think that's the most likely scenario, or more likely than the other ones. That's why I would like just.
But I feel like they're going to cover. I mean, they may still lose, but I feel like they're going to cover. I feel like it's going to be 28-24 for one team or the other.
Okay.
But either way, USC would cover a 5.5.
That's.
I haven't fully decided where I'm leaning for our actual staff picks that matter, but I agree with Shotgun. I want to say that the travel thing, I'm not going to say that automatically means Penn State's going to lose, but do I think that means they're going to be able to blow them out or win by more than one score? I'm going to say it's probably the more conservative bet to take USC to cover in this game.
all right.
Because Penn State is the team that's traveling 2+ time zones, going across the country. And you guys mentioned it on Helium Boy Shotgun, but the wounded animal approach. USC is the wounded animal right now. That's what Michigan was when USC came to town. Was probably the worst team on paper, beat USC. Minnesota was a wounded animal, had lost 7 straight Power 5 games, but they welcome in USC. They're a less talented team. They beat USC. I think USC is now in that spot. You have to win every game on the rest of the schedule to make the college football playoff. I don't think that's going to happen, but it starts in this week, and it's a big atmosphere, big environment that I think USC is able to cover. They lose. I think it's more likely they lose by 3 or 4 than they lose by 7 to 10. Definitely not 11 points, Ryan. But I'm not saying I think they're going to win. I might make that my prediction just for one last ride because USC, they lose this game, I think the season can really spiral. I don't know where it would end up. Maybe it's worse than last year. You never really know. But the schedule looked easy in the back half. Now you look and it's like if they lose this game and they're 3-3, how many more games do they win? Because the games that we thought were maybe easier aren't as easy, and they haven't won in a true road game yet, and then they'd be 1-1 in the Coliseum. You never really know, but because of that wounded animal approach, I do think they have a chance. So I'll probably take USC to cover.
All right.
The problem with the wounded animal approach is that they are actually wounded.
That's true.
That's the big concern because Gentry, playmaker. Anthony Lucas is a guy that I will be scouting out before the game to see, is he in pads? Is he warming up? How's he look going? Because I think that's huge for them to have him out there, because when he left the game, that's when suddenly things opened up for Minnesota's offense. And they were just able to get to the edge anytime they wanted to. They were able to run to that side at Sam Green, at Jade Abasiri on the same side. We had someone ask a question earlier if Jade Abasiri's played. He played 10 snaps. This is his first time playing with the first team. I think it was 6 or 8 of those came in the fourth quarter. So, suddenly they just had to throw all these young guys in there. Are they going to be healthy enough to be able to do that? And then if they are healthy, are Nate Clifton and Jamil Muhammad playing at the end, or are you going with the young guys? That was a bit surprising to me when I started going through my participation charts and realizing, wait a minute, Nate Clifton only played 8 of the final 32 snaps. He's been their most consistent defensive lineman that they've trusted the most, it seems like, even over Gavin Meyer, and in this game did not use him. So I don't know if he got banged up or what. And then Jamil Muhammad was in and out, but with the game on the line, there were multiple timeouts leading up to that fourth down. They kept Sam Green in there. They kept Jade Abasiri in there. I mean, Nate Clifton wasn't on the final play because of the package they were in, which was 6 defensive linemen. But, leading up to that, he was not. And Jamil Muhammad could have put him in, decided not to. So that was a little bit surprising to me going back and looking through some of those.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up the show?
Yeah, if you're going to come out to the game, you want to come by the House of Victory tailgate, that's always fun. We'll be out there, and should be another good one. And we do appreciate everyone coming in. I think Michael in the chat said you guys might as well wrap up the show for the year. No, we're going to talk about this all the time. This is a linchpin game, though, for sure. And it wouldn't have been if you beat Minnesota. You could lose to Penn State. Now it's changed. Now you have to go out and win. This is you have to be the wounded animal. Minnesota fixed them, did what they needed to do, won the game. I think this is what you got to do, just figure out a way to beat Penn State. So they're scratching their heads, going, "Oh my God, we outplayed them. We should have beat them 10 times out of 10." And that's what you want. However you do it, you figure out a way to win, and they're frustrated as hell, going, "Man, this was our game to win, and we blew it." Be on the other side of that for once, and just figure out a way to win. So coaches get paid a lot of money. Figure it out. Just do it. So
whatever it takes, because as you said, I can't think to open the show, but this feels like a season-defining game.
Yes.
If they go to 3-3, like Jack said, things could spiral. If they win this game, get top 5, you're back in probably the top 15, depending on some other results. But you're back in the rankings. You again have momentum. If you can then go across the country and beat Maryland, who has not played very well, even though it is the travel and all that, suddenly you start putting things together a little bit going into a Friday night matchup with Rutgers. You have the advantage there. Then you have Nebraska, at home. You have UCLA, across the town. You have Notre Dame at home. All these things, USC should have an opportunity to build some momentum, but it all starts this weekend.
Yeah.
So if you're a coach, you pull out every stop, every trick play that needs to be run, every gadget, every sneak attack play that you have, whatever it takes, because everything is on the line, it feels like, with this game.
And, Lincoln Riley was 55-10 at Oklahoma. And I mentioned it, I think, going into the 2022 Notre Dame game. It's he doesn't lose these games. The games that they need to win, he didn't lose those games. They didn't through 2022. Now he's 22-10 at USC. So 55 wins and 10 losses at Oklahoma, 22 wins and 10 losses at USC. I also feel like this is a program-defining game. If this season spirals, you take all of the positives that we have been, some of the first to talk about, giving them praise for fixing the defense, going and maybe finding guys in recruiting, getting big commits. If you spiral this season, and you've spiraled the last 2 seasons, and all of a sudden with a loss in this game, you're 22-11, you're winning 2 out of every 3 games. That's that could be a program-defining game, because if you're winning 2 out of every 3, you're an 8-4 team every year, not a team that's 55-10 across a stretch like Lincoln Riley was at Oklahoma. So I think there's a lot on the line in this game, and we'll be back to break it down on Sunday. I think that the way that the game goes will certainly define the way that Sunday show goes. And
are you coming in, or is it Chris for Sunday?
Sunday, I'll be back.
Oh, okay. So the 3 of us were back.
There we go. I got a red-eye flight to get back. So
nice. All right, we'll try to make it one show, so you don't have to do 2 parts. I'll try to put it together on YouTube if you guys want to watch the whole thing. But we appreciate you going through the technical difficulties and following us back on there. So sorry if you were watching it. Yeah, we started one stream and went to the second one. Jack handled it well. We got it going. We got everyone back, hopefully. So it's good.
Now like, subscribe,
Yes.
share this, and then also subscribe on the P.
Yeah, USCfootball.com. 30% off if you want an annual membership. You want to be the most informed USC Trojan fan out there, right? When you're in the water cooler, if they still do that at the office, and you're talking about USC football, you want to mention stuff that you read in the war room, or Chris put in his ghost notes, or Shotgun shared with you, or me or Jack, whatever it is, and you're going to know these things. And they're like, how did you know that? I'm like, USCfootball.com.
There you go. Can't write a better endorsement than that. But thank you guys for watching Tunnel Vision. Again, the 3 of us will be back on Sunday to break down the game. We'll see whether we're talking about USC's first win over a top 5 team in what would be 8 years, or whether it's a 3-3 start and a disappointing beginning to the season. But thank you guys so much for watching with Shotgun Spratling and Ryan Abraham. I'm Jack Smith. We'll see you guys next time on Tunnel Vision.